Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
We are most fortunate to have as our guest today Dr. Louise McCants, and I can testify to the fact that while on our campus with our faculty, administrators, and students, she is a very, very informative person. I know our program will be most informative to you. As to her background, our guest was one of the first women at Oklahoma State University to graduate from their mathematics department, and she became the youngest graduate of that program at age 19. After completing her work there, she was hired as an analytical statistician for the Department of Defense of the United States government, and after some time she returned to school years later and received her doctorate degree from Ohio State University. She has served as the chairperson of a department and director of research, dean of general studies, dean of arts and sciences, culminating then in the position of director of instructional services at the Metropolitan Community Colleges of Kansas City, Missouri. Our guest has not only taught and been an administrator and lectured, but she is also an author. She is the author of 2 books, the first one entitled Choosing What's Best for You, and her second book, How to Retire for Fun and Profit, with co-author Cavett Robert. Dr. McCants, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Idaho and to our program.
Thank you, Tony. I'm delighted to be here.
And I'm very happy to welcome to the panel to question our guest today. To my immediate left is Joe Webb, who is the special assistant to the president at North Idaho College. And next to her is Dr. Robert Bennett, who is the president of North Idaho College. And I would ask Dr. Bennett to commence the questioning.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's my pleasure to be here today. And I'd like to start by saying that the women on both sides of me represent, I think, some extremely important talent. In addition to talking to Louise, I've had an opportunity over the last 2 years to know Joe Webb better, and she too has had many important changes in her life and has contributed in a very nice way, I think, to this community. Louise, you and I worked together at Kirkwood Community College, and you were the Dean of Arts and Sciences, and I learned very quickly that part of your management style was to use what I think is a unique sense of humor. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of humor in terms of being a person in management?
I suppose at its core I use humor, Bob, because I would prefer people to laugh with me rather than at me.
It's a good comment.
I think it's effective because if you can turn off criticism with grace and good humor, that is, even though you understand it and take it to heart, people will be a little bit more tolerant of your reactions and your explanations to things. I really think humor is the secret of going through life and getting through it in one piece.
Well, if I can just follow up on that for just a minute. I know in your speech today you started the whole speech, which was Retire to Fun and Freedom, with humor, and it seemed to warm the audience. And I've seen you do that so well with members of the faculty when there was a difference of opinion.
Well, do I have time to tell a story?
You always have time.
When I was going through the search process at Kirkwood for the faculty, I said to the faculty, what do you want of a dean? And they said, we want somebody to fight for us. And I said, hey, that's a part of being a dean, but that's not all. And I told them a story about growing up in Arkansas and having a little dog who was kind of a romantic little dog and would hear the call of the wild, and he'd go out and get chewed up. And I said, well, that has got to be the dumbest dog, said I to my father, and the worst fighter in the world. And my father said, no, you're wrong. He's a smart little dog. He's not a dumb little dog, and he's really quite a good fighter. He's really a marvelous fighter. What he is a poor judge of dogs. And I said, I'll go out and fight for you, but I can't always guarantee that I will win for you. And they remembered that story as evidence of my sincerity, and I tell that rather long-winded story because it does make the point. They remembered the dog story and my intent.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Dr. McCants, I would like to proceed with the question as we're circling around with our panel. You've gotten some very informative information from the government of the United States and other sources, and you've been sharing that with us today. And we have many people in our viewing audience that's wondering about the future as far as jobs and economics and what some of their choices would be. Would you please indicate for us what the changes are that are coming in this country, and that could be helpful in career choices and also in changing careers, as we do often in this country today?
Oh, I'll certainly try. Because these statistics came from the Workforce 2000 report. They're the U.S. Department of Labor's report, not my statistics. Right now we're in a service economy, and 40% of the jobs are over on the side that requires very little skill and training. You can get ready for these jobs in weeks or months. Only 25% of our jobs right now are in the high skill category. Within 7 to 10 years' time, that situation will reverse, and we will have no more than 25% of our jobs in the low skill category, because automation will take over and take care of the 3 Ds, the dull, the dirty, the dangerous. But 40% of the jobs available in this country will require an enormous amount of skill and training. Not all of it scientific training, but training. And that big switch will come about in a hurry.
And I believe you indicated that if we're not very perceptive to that happening, that we may get there and have jobs with no one to fill those. So how are we going to train and make sure that we fill that demand?
Well, I worry about who will fill those jobs, because coming into the labor market, the statistics show that only 15% of those jobs will be filled by young white men. Many of these jobs will have to be filled by women, by immigrants, and by older workers. My point is that people over 50 who are highly skilled have an obligation to their country to continue using those skills, because those jobs will need to be filled by someone.
So there's really a misconception, I believe, out in the public now, because many people are saying that they thought there were going to be more and more service jobs and that they could spend the rest of their life without a lot of college or training. And you're speaking to the contrary.
I am speaking very much to the contrary. We are right now in a service economy. We're going to switch to an information economy in a great hurry. And the wonderful jobs, which people will enjoy tremendously, are jobs that will require training, skill, and talent far beyond the high school level.
Thank you. Joe Webb.
Well, Dr. McCants, in speaking to people who are 50 and over, particularly in terms of fun and freedom in retirement, and preparing for that, or even retiring at 50, you might say, that only means retiring to some new interests. And you point out that people in that category must realize that their past professional achievements may no longer matter. They have to have courage. Perhaps you could expand upon that idea.
Well, I quoted this morning from Pericles, who said the secret to happiness is freedom, and the secret to freedom is a brave heart. But the fact is that when I think of retiring to freedom, it's giving yourself the freedom to do what you do well. Not necessarily doing the job you've done for 20 or 25 years that you didn't particularly enjoy and didn't do well, but select from your talents those talents that are really fine, those that you do extremely well. That's the freedom part. The fun comes in doing it.
Certainly. You also pointed out that these people may be the last generation that have the collective memory of the frontier American type, the pioneer type, and have the self-sufficient attitude that's bred into our generation, and we hope will continue.
I think that may be true, and of course our generation has had the best of America. We grew up and started our working careers when America was responsible for 44% of all the production in this country. We grew up in very prosperous times and had our working career in very prosperous times. But this memory of the frontier, my father was born in 1884. As a little boy, 6 or 7, he went with his parents on a wagon train to Oklahoma when Oklahoma was opened up to settlers in 1889. And I've heard him talk many times about the trails as they went into Indian territory. Now that's the kind of memory I speak of. Our generation has heard stories of that sort.
I see.
Dr. Bennett.
And it's a strength. I think having the perspective of where you've come from certainly makes a difference in terms of where you're going. I think that's what you were speaking to. Louise, you and I have been in the community college business for a while. All of us have here. And one of the real strengths of a community college, I think, would be the opportunities that are offered to women. Oftentimes women do not have the opportunity to leave the community. They may be having the responsibility for family or whatever else. Would you speak for a few minutes in terms of what you see happening throughout this country in community colleges and opportunities for women?
Oh, I'd be happy to. As you know, that's something I I have very passionate convictions
I know you
about
do.
that. Well, I believe the opportunities of the future will be based on talent, not on physical strength, which women don't always have, but on talent and creativity. And I believe more that women have an absolute obligation to work just as hard as men do. So full citizenship means taking on full responsibility. And community colleges give women the opportunity to test themselves in the first 2 years of an academic career, stay close to home, get good educations, and do it in an environment that is supportive. And I absolutely applaud that.
Thank you. I think that we have seen, certainly with the Center for New Directions and several other programs, that women have increasingly, and a little older woman, has increasingly thought the community college, and particularly NIC, is a special place. And I'm glad to hear you speak to that.
Thank you. Well, you see, a woman of a generation back really felt she didn't have to work. Her husband had to work after they were married, but she had the option of deciding whether or not she wanted to. Women nowadays know that the facts are different.
They don't have that choice.
They don't have that choice. The economy does not support that choice.
Dr. McCants, one of the things that's exciting to me as an educator and a teacher in particular, and just my philosophy, is that the opportunity that today provides for all of us to change if we wish. And some people go 3 or 4 occupations in a lifetime, and you speak to that with eloquence. And I would like for you to help our viewers who are considering maybe a career change. And we used to think that by the time you were 28 or 30 that you could not make a change, and that's certainly not true today. And you have something you talk about, what I call the ABC plan, as you've identified it. Would you share that with us and assist our viewers in, I guess, putting some structure to the decisions they might make in the future about their life?
Well, I'd be happy to. The A stands for accepting responsibility for your own life. We really cannot hand off the responsibility for our choices to anyone else. So A is accepting responsibility, and B is believing in your own potential. I think each one of us has a unique set of talents. And the freedom I would like to see every adult give to himself or herself is the freedom to develop those strong talents that are there, and not just rush into some job because it's there waiting to be filled. I think if we do what we have the innate talent to do, we'll be much happier. And of course, C stands for commit to the choice. Make your choice. Choosing is hard for everybody, because so long as we don't make a choice, we delude ourselves into thinking that all choices are possible. Of course, they're not, but we evade choices because so long as we don't make a commitment, we see all these opportunities out there.
And I know there's some people that are reaching what they consider the normal age for retirement, but they don't want to sit down and should not. And I don't think in this country we've really tapped the wisdom that senior citizens have to the point we should. I think of Colonel Sanders as an example, started his business after a so-called retirement age. You also have a beautiful story that I was impressed with this morning about a lady that you met in writing your book. And maybe if you'd share that with our audience, that might inspire someone who's reaching 64 or 65 in retirement, how they can move on to another challenging pursuit in life.
Well, I'd love to tell her story, and her story was made possible because we are now in a computer age. This woman retired at age 65. She'd been a cook in a junior high school, worked hard all her life. Somebody told her that she could take courses in the local community college for free after she got to be 65. I hope you can do that here in your college.
We have a reduced rate.
Good, good. Well, she took a computer course, made an A, took another computer course, made an A, took 3, and got hired. She got hired by a travel agency, and she was so good with the computers, she was also good with people, they hired her to lead tours of senior citizens. And she was so successful, the day I met her, she was buying her clothes to lead a tour to the Holy Land. Now that's progress. That's a long way from standing on your feet in a sweaty cafeteria.
And in addition to that, too, she had another a point of wisdom for you about standing on your own feet. And I wish you'd share that, too.
I will. She said to me, she said, Louise, you go around telling women to stand on their own feet. She said, there's more to it than that. It's where you stand that's important. She said, I'm having a lot more fun looking up at the spires of a cathedral than I ever had standing over that steam table in the cafeteria.
I think that's a beautiful story and an inspiring one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joelle.
Well, I'd like to expand on the idea that you suggest that after one has examined all these elements and tried to pick goals and so forth, one should enjoy what one is doing. What do you consider the barriers among people in this age bracket to enjoying what they're doing?
I think we have been so conditioned to be such a dutiful generation, and we were conditioned by parents who'd gone through the Depression. We are so conditioned to be pragmatic that we haven't given ourselves the freedom of the sheer pleasure of doing something simply because we like to do that particular task. And I think we get bound in by those misconceptions. I believe anybody who has spent 25 to 30 years doing a job of any sort has earned the right to go out and either volunteer for fun or do something line of work that even appears frivolous, but still gives pleasure.
Certainly. In connection with choosing goals, the same thing might apply, using that as a criteria, I presume. A lot of people have not analyzed what they like, and you give some suggestions as to how they can start thinking along those lines.
I ask people to keep a happiness chart. It's a little like keeping your temperature chart. I ask them 4 times a day to stop and think, am I happy? And at the end of the day, to check on a little chart. At that half of the day or that quarter of the day, was I reasonably happy, moderately happy, or not happy? And then to do a little analysis. I was a math major, and to say, where was I, what was I doing, and who was I with? And after about 60 days, the pattern of your happiness will become abundantly clear. And I say, don't share it with anybody. It's nobody else's business.
Very good point.
Dr. Bennett.
I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to go and chart myself and see how I do over the next few, what did you say, how many days?
60, I
60,
think.
oh, that's a long time, but I'll
Get
see
a
what I
set
can
of
do.
4 or 5 cards.
Well, that's good. I may do that. Louise, I want to get personal for a minute.
All right.
I've known you to have gone through several career changes in your life. When you were with me at Kirkwood, you were a very busy lady trying to handle a lot of assistant deans and manage many different people. And then I thought at the end of that time that Louise would be one unhappy lady. Then she decided she'd go to another college and try the same kind of thing. And then I thought, well, Louise has finally reached a time in her life where she's going to quit the role of a professional educator, and what will this very busy, talented lady do? And now I find that you're off running around all over the country giving speeches and workshops. Now this is a dramatic change of pace from what I saw you doing earlier. How's this all working for you?
Well, it's working just fine because I ask myself the question, what do I really enjoy doing? I enjoy interacting with people. I enjoy the interaction of ideas. Now, the travel is just a necessary part of it. I don't get any kick out of hanging around airports. But
now, Louise, you said the other day you liked it.
well, that's when I was in training to be a bag lady. But I ask myself the question, not necessarily what do I do well, but when am I the happiest? And I have no mechanical ability, as you well remember, and so I thought I better focus on the 2 strengths I do have.
All right.
And so I did a little analysis before I went into this.
Let me pursue that for just a minute, for the sake of those who are thinking about career changes, as Joe suggested earlier. Now, I recognize that you just got off of, what, 3 weeks? Has it been 3 weeks now? You've toured the whole Northwest, and you've been in Alaska, and you've hit a lot of different communities. You're going back, jumping on another plane, and going to the East Coast. How does that hit? I mean, you certainly don't have the same amount of energy you had when you were 40. Are you able to handle that all right?
Not quite as well as I mean to, with a little bit more training. There are payoffs, and then of course, there's a price. For everything, there is both a prize and a price.
Okay.
The price is that I do get tired sometimes. The prize is that I have such a wonderful time, I'm willing to get a little tired. But you notice I never hesitate to give myself 2- and 3-, 4-day vacations when I can. And yesterday I was out hiking as a part of my vacation to myself.
On Tubbs Hill.
On Tubbs Hill.
Very good.
Yes.
Dr. McCants, I want to take advantage of your expertise, and I've talked to a lot of people about the frustration is that there are so many people want to do what you're recommending. They would like to get into a particular occupation. It doesn't seem to be available where they are. This is a very big country. There's a lot of openings, a lot of jobs, and I don't think we've done a very good job matching the talent and expertise we have with the openings. Is there some way of doing some kind of national search that's more efficient than what we've done in the past? Do you have any ideas on how people could report in somewhere there's like a clearinghouse of information?
Well, it's a wonderful idea. I had not given that any thought. I know we have NCHEMS and we have various outlets in Washington. We probably should be doing that. It's certainly possible with the computer to do that. Probably need little help at the top, at some federal agency. We have a whole new turnover of staff at the top. I would urge you to pursue that with our new Department of Labor head.
Well, thank you. Joe Webb.
Well, working for fun and profit as well as retiring for fun and freedom, the both can be combined, I assume.
Indeed, and all my creditors wish me to keep right on doing it.
Well, goals are often hard for people, and I suppose one should have some sort of a way of categorizing one's past and looking at what one's talents are.
I sometimes think I've been guilty of too much introspection and looking at my past. I think many of us find it easier to look at the past than to project into the future. If I had to choose between the two, I would think trying to project in the future would be the more valuable of the two. Now, I think it's instructive to say what are my strengths, but I really always feel bad to hear somebody dwell on their past mistakes. And I think as human beings, we're awfully good at dwelling on our failures, and probably haven't been conditioned all that much to dwell on our successes.
Dr. Bennett.
We get to go again, right? Louise, I'm going to take a different track altogether.
All right.
One of the things I used to notice about you when you would walk across the campus is that you always looked pretty classy. You had excellent taste in clothing, and you always presented yourself well with respect to the way you looked. Now, I think so many times, we came through the 60s and we got pretty sloppy with things. We moved away from that a little bit. But certainly in education, I think we've wrestled with this concept in terms of, is it important to look good in front of your students or with whomever you're working? It's always seemed important, at least from my perspective. That's always been important to you. I remember one time you said, Bob, there's a standard that you follow with respect to color, and you gave me that little formula. I don't remember it now, but I do remember you having it. Point is, I'd like for you to speak a little bit about the business of style and dress and relate that a little bit to success with respect to management or whatever one would do.
All right. I will. I think the way you dress sends an extremely important signal, and it is possibly the first signal people pick up about you. The second signal is when they hear your voice and decide whether or not you're speaking in a literate fashion or not, in a well-educated fashion. But before these people hear your voice, they see you. And they form an impression that may or may not be compatible with the inner you, and may or may not be compatible with the intellectual activity you have. My notion is that when you dress for a profession, you ought to send a signal which is totally compatible with the image that you're trying to present of that profession. So much as I admire the freedom that artists have when they give themselves in their dress, I would be sending false signals if I tried to dress as an artist. I'm not one.
Very good point.
There's something else that's really important, and I think you've already alluded to that a little bit today, but I want to let you expand upon it. The medical profession tells us that one of the things that's hurting health in this country and may be directed at a lot of our diseases, and that is stress. And stress has certainly increased. We are a much more fast-paced society, and I guess we're more hyper and less time even for relaxation. And you indicated that you used humor a lot, and I'm sure that's one point. But would you speak to that whole issue of, even if you like what you do, in many occupations there's a lot of stress, how would you recommend that we deal with that?
Well, that's a perceptive question, because that was the thing that concerned me the most as I started this new occupation on the speaking circuit. I actually took a seminar, a very expensive course, in learning how to relax. And I spend 20 minutes morning and afternoon, and I just carve them out of my day in deep breathing exercises so that I can really center myself and get relaxed. It's a temporary measure, but it's a very effective measure.
I'm happy to hear you say that, because on a national program just recently, a gentleman who was an expert in the area said that breathing exercises was just very, very much part of that.
And it really does help you to relax, slow down, and focus on the here and now.
Thank you. Joe Webb.
I know we always think we're in a hurry in this country, and that's one of the things that it takes some discipline to stop doing. I think it would be nice if you would give us your 6 curriculum requirements for the most important degree of all, the diploma in the art of living.
Well, and this comes from the book, Retired of Fun and Freedom, but the first one is remember your roots. Remember who you are and where you came from, and don't try to build on a foundation that isn't there. And the second is, but live in the present. And the third is, cherish your friends. I have come to the conclusion that friends are very rare commodity, dear friends. And my definition of a friend is somebody who knows you through and through and likes you anyway. There's a friend. And then I believe in using your talents and living in harmony with your heart. I mean, there is an inner you which tells you what you want to do. And I believe that your life really has to live in that kind of harmony. Whatever your actions are, if they're not in harmony with what you really feel inside, you have a true problem.
Thank you.
Dr. Bennett.
Well, we're getting close to the time when we won't be able to talk much longer in this kind of a panel, but besides being a successful person in terms of your career, you've raised 3 children.
Yes.
And in light of what you just said to Joe, and recognizing that all of us who have been parents reach some very frustrating times in our lives trying to be successful parents, what advice could you give that person who's wrestling with just wanting to be a good parent and also wanting to be a happy person himself?
Well, I suppose when my children were young, I think I focused more on trying to be a good parent and let the happiness part slide a little bit.
It is a little difficult sometimes.
So maybe you can't have them all at once. But I think discipline is enormously important in raising children, but I think children judge you as much by what you do as what you say. Children are hard to fool. You have to love them, but you have to be totally sincere because you cannot fool your own child. You have to set the example.
With that, I'm so sorry to bring the program to conclusion. We have many other things we'd like to talk about because you're so much fun to talk with and so informative. But on behalf of the panel and the staff, we thank you. And as you leave, Dr. McCants, I'd like to indicate that you've left us with lots of wisdom from your life experiences and your education. And I know that our viewers have been tremendously helped, and that's why we do this program. And we hope you can come back in the future and be with us again.
Thank you, Tony. I'd love to.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you've enjoyed the program, and it's been a delight for us to bring it to you. I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to write to us, and we will correspond with you. And until next week, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.